tuned in to The Andrew Lawton Show.
Speaking of Western Canada, are the health and wellness of Canada's oil and gas sector. Yesterday, we spoke about how energy efficiency regulations are driving up the cost of housing. Today, we have a story that I found kind of interesting from Germany, where Volkswagen has laid off a significant number of its electric vehicle manufacturing employees because demand in electric vehicles has dropped thanks to Germany dropping subsidies of them, which makes me wonder. Well, I didn't have to wonder. I already sort of knew that electric vehicle production is an absolute racket. It's only viable as long as it is being subsidized. And you look in a Canadian context and see the billions of dollars that the Liberal government and Ontario PC government, I should also say, have put into electric vehicle manufacturing here, which will only have a market and a consumer base when electric vehicle purchases are being subsidized. So this may not even be as magically transformative to the labor force as we're being told to justify this money. And this is adjacent to a discussion I wanted to have on this show about a new grassroots group that's formed called Energy United, which has at its core set out to tell the story of Canada's energy sector. And this is a story that very much needs to be told because of how much misinformation there is about it, certainly in much of the legacy media's coverage. Joining me from Energy United is the campaign manager, Jarret Coels. Jarret, good to talk to you. Thanks for coming on today.
Thanks, Andrew. It's great to be here.
So I gave like the one sentence summary, but I'll let you in your words explain what Energy United is.
Yeah, so we're a grassroots advocacy organization with a mission to promote practical environmental and energy policy in Canada. You know, we're not just a drill baby drill organization or an anti-environmental or just straight up energy advocacy organization. We believe that we just need to have much more practical policy around energy and environmental policies, especially how we develop our natural resource and utilize our land. And unfortunately, that story is just not being told. You see a lot of the vocal minority pushing the policies these days that are really ideologically driven, and they're holding back our economy and they're hurting Canadians. And we felt at Energy United that that story just wasn't out there enough, and the impacts to Canadians on affordability, on reliability, just wasn't being examined or discussed. And, you know, there are always trade-offs to everything. And, you know, it's good to have important environmental and strong environmental ambitions, but, you know, we still have to have rational discussions about the trade-offs.
I know you've particularly weighed in on these electricity regulations, which there's been some pushback on, notably from Alberta. Premier Danielle Smith's government has been sounding the alarm about this, but not as much from other provinces to the same degree. And I think they should be. Why is this one you've decided to seize?
Well, you know, just like any good campaign, it's really top of mind. The federal government just released their draft regulations last month in August 2023. They're currently in a 75-day consultation period, asking Canadians what they think about these electricity regulations. And in our opinion, just the way that they're proposed and the aggressive timelines and then the way the mandates are structured, they could have serious impacts to our grid's reliability and to the impacts on affordability with Canadians. So that's one thing. I mean, energy is essential. We all need energy to just do our daily lives. I think a lot of us in Canada have taken it for granted. And electricity is going to be essential as we move forward, as things continue to electrify. But getting rid of natural gas, which is one of the most sustainable and affordable, reliable forms of electricity, we think is a very serious error in judgment that will hurt our ability to grow our economy, create jobs, and just maintain reliable and affordable power.
I mentioned in the lead into this the electric vehicle thing, but what I find notable about that is that there you have government policies and subsidies that are trying to manufacture a demand. And as a result, then you have justification for all of these additional subsidies to, you know, ramp up production to meet that demand. With oil and gas, you have an existing demand in the world, and it's actually government regulations that are blocking producers from meeting that demand.
Yeah, and you know, I didn't major in economics. I'm not an economist by trade, but you know, to me, restricting the supply of something that is inelastic, that just has this demand, just doesn't seem like it's going to reduce demand for it. It's just going to, you know, it's going to increase costs. It's going to reduce energy security if we're relying on other countries to import it. So it's just one of those situations where it doesn't make a lot of sense for us. It's not really a common sense solution. if you look at the campaign that we're running, we mentioned that the federal government did a forced phase out of coal-fired electricity. A lot of those provinces switched to natural gas because it's a cleaner burning fuel, it's more sustainable, and they reduced their emissions. In the United States, for instance, the largest emissions reductions they've had are from switching from coal to natural gas. Now, as they're still going through that 2030 coal phase out, the government's moved the goalposts on these provinces again, saying that you can't have any new natural gas commissioned after 2025 unless it has carbon capture and storage. But they've even admitted that that technology isn't available yet. So we're really playing like a hope and wait game that could have serious impacts on Canadians.
I think one of the most telling examples of this problem was Germany coming hat in hand, basically saying we need natural gas, we need to replace, we need LNG, we need this, and Canada looking and saying, all right, well, we've now been already so far behind, we couldn't just flip a switch and meet that demand. And the problem that I have with this debate and this discussion is that oftentimes it's years too late when we realize that we've missed an opportunity, that we failed by not investing in the infrastructure ahead of time. And I guess the question I would ask is it too late? Has that ship already sailed?
I don't think it's too late at all, and I don't think that ship has sailed. I have a similar frustration with you when they say, we're years too late, and then you see critics of our ability to export our products or critics of the industry say, it doesn't make sense economically. But when they're talking about the economics of the project, they never talk about the regulatory burden that is increasing costs far beyond what they should be in this country relative to other jurisdictions like the United States. Like the United States can build an LNG train facility in way less time than we can in Canada. Our first one was announced right around the same time that the United States started building LNG facilities, LNG Canada out in Kitimat. That still is under construction, and now the United States is the largest exporter in the world of LNG. And you see other countries signing long-term agreements well past 2050 to maintain natural gas supplies, where in Canada we have a very singular focused approach on just renewables or nothing. And it's really more
Yeah.
of an all of the above situation that we need with the growing demand for energy.
Yeah, and just on that demand, I mean, the one thing that a lot of the activists and the governments that seem to be beholden to activists missed is that you don't stop demand by restricting supply. And so basically it means the question is who's going to fill that void and who's going to supply that demand. And as your organization has pointed out, it's, almost always these dictatorial regimes that aren't as beholden to these environmental pet causes. Saudi Arabia, China, Iran to some parts of the world, and Russia.
Yeah, Venezuela's still up there. Qatar is like one of the biggest producers of LNG. Of the top 10 oil producers in the world, like United States, Canada, I mean, Norway are up there as like democratic and free countries. Like, who do you want to trust to actually move forward to create a more sustainable product that we actually essentially need? I mean, we can't just say that no oil and gas is good because we're going to need that product. And if we import it, who do you trust to actually make sure that that's going to be doing environmental sustainability? If you look at someone like Saudi Arabia, Saudi Aramco couldn't even be listed on the New York Stock Exchange because they wouldn't provide the transparency necessary to earn that listing.
So what is it that you would like to see from, I mean, let's start with the federal government and then we can talk about provinces, but from the federal government, what would be your top priorities for them on this?
I think it's they're just moving too far too fast on too many things. I know there's been a lot of talk lately about the carbon tax and the impacts to Canadians on that, but if you really look at everything that they've done with respect, there's the carbon tax, there's a clean fuel regulation, there's methane reduction targets, there's the emissions cap, there's the Sustainable Jobs Act, there's C-69, the Impact Assessment Act, there's the C-48, no more tankers. There's also just this kind of lukewarm support for the industry, which turns away investors and people that want to make long-term capital commitments. So really, it's one of those things where it's like, you got to wait and let these policies kind of see and how they're working before you add additional layers of regulation that are just going to hurt investment and competitiveness and drive it elsewhere. And it's just going to end up hurting Canada in the long run. So I think it's kind of just a slow down, let these policies take effect and let companies catch up and show I would say progress in what they're doing before you hit them with another policy, especially the stick policies that Canada's been using relative to the incentive-based policies, the carrots in the United States.
To look at the provincial level, one of the problems we have, just as a matter of geography, is that it's the coastal provinces that have been often the most resistant to the oil and gas sector, BC on the west and Quebec on the east. So what is it you need to see from the provincial landscape to fix this, or at least work towards a better model?
I mean, if you ever look at that's like a really good question. I think you see the premiers getting on side a lot more with certain interprovincial trade issues. I know energy has just become more of a it's almost like a religious sort of thing now where it's a very moral argument and less of an economic argument.
Mhm.
So I think just kind of understanding those rational and fact-based arguments, understanding that there are going to be impacts on affordability. I mean, a lot of what I see today is people talking about the 20 to 25 years in the future and not focusing on the issues today and what we can do to manage those issues today. So even focusing on more so in the present and how we can work on those policies to work on affordability today and less on like we're going to be doing this by 2050 when who knows what's going to be happening within the next 5 to 10 years. I mean, the last 5 years shows that we live in a pretty volatile time. So I think it's just kind of that slow down, the cooperation. It's one of those situations with energy where, good politics often collides with good policy. So I think it's just that leadership where we have to put forward that good policy, even if it's not great politics.
Jarret Coels from Energy United. You can check them out at energyunited.ca. Jarret, thank you so much for coming on today.
Really appreciate it, Andrew. Anytime. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to The Andrew Lawton Show. Support the program by donating to True North at www.tnc.news.